Okay, so this is the second part of demo D112. I just filed the document in federal court. Now, I have to tell you, I wasn't completely honest at the beginning of this demo about what I was filing. I said it was a notice of appeal because I was appealing the dismissal because today was the last day. I knew that that wasn't true. The last day was actually yesterday, okay? And I did not file the appeal yesterday on purpose, in a way. And I want to here record my reasoning and, why I did this, right? So it's a sequence. So the goal of this sequence is basically to create a second rope. If you heard the previous demos, you will know about this strategy. So this guy broke away, and now the next guy is gonna come in. See? So the one on the back is the level. So let's let him pass to get his plate. Right. So this is the level 2. Victor, January Victor 5374. It's a gray Accord. Now, the level 2 that I got 2 days ago, I think, or yesterday, was also a gray sedan. And I'm mentioning this because it could be a coincidence, right? But it also could be that the level 2s are gray sedans. Right? Could be a marker. I mean, the type and color of the vehicle. And the one that I have on the back is another, it's not gray, but it's dark. It's another sedan. The one on the back is a Kia, and the one on the front is I think it's an Acura or a Honda. I think it's a Honda Accord, I think. Anyhow, I'll continue, okay? Right, so the goal here, but you saw that, right? It's impressive. As soon, the second I started talking about the lawyers and the attorneys and the judges, that car broke away, and he was following me consistently. But he broke away, and then the gray sedan was just waiting behind him, right? And he started approaching me. It's impressive. I mean, the consistency and standardization that they have on this thing. Anyhow, so the idea is to create a second rope. Okay, it's a clone of the rope that I already created that I described before. The way I did it this time was filing a motion to vacate the order to dismiss. Instead of appealing it, I'm asking the judge himself to vacate it. Of course, he's gonna say no, but in this motion, I attached the filing with the Supreme Court that has all the evidence of the RICO conspiracy, right? Including the mention of his own name is in this exhibit, right? So it's the same paradox as before, the same situation that Judge Hitler faced, right? So if he dismisses it, then I'm going to appeal that, and that's going to end in the Court of Appeals of the Fifth Circuit, and then it's a nuclear situation for the clerk, because like that clerk of the appellate court of the Fifth Circuit, he already pulled off that rules of filing the wrong document, right, and creating a Frankenstein case, right, that he manufactured to create confusion and make the judge think that this is the appeal, but it's not the appeal, right? Like he created a fake case, but he already spent that bullet. I mean, he already used that ruse, right? And now I'm creating the exact same situation. So this is a clone. This is a clone of the same situation. So what is the clerk going to do now? Is he going to pull a new ruse, or he's going to do the same ruse? If he does it again, whatever he does, right? But if he obstructs justice again, it's very problematic for the network because, let's see, the guy on the back is listening. It's very problematic for the network because, if you have this situation between a judge and a clerk, right? I mean, you could argue, it's okay. Sorry. You could argue, it was a mistake, right? It was a clerical error, or, it could be downplayed, right? But if you have the same situation of obstruction of justice with two different cases, with two different judges of the lower court, of the Southern District of Texas, and two different cases with two different sets of defendants, but the same plaintiff. I mean, now this is not just an error or a simple crime. This is a conspiracy. I mean, this is a pattern of racketeering at this point, right? So he cannot do it again. I mean, I think, right? If he does it again, I mean, it's just good for me, right? So he will have to process that appeal, and at that point, this game over, right? So I don't know. That's the goal of this second rope. So now there's not one but two ropes, and they're all holding them together. It's like a circle of ropes at this point. So let's see what they do with that. It's an explosive scenario that just happened. Now I have to tell you, the reason why I didn't file the appeal before, I didn't file the appeal. I could have filed it yesterday, right? But I had two reasons to do this, right? The first and most powerful reason was that because in the previous case, what the clerk did, I'm talking about the clerk of the appellate court of the Fifth Circuit, right? What he did is that he took a different order from Hittner, and he attached it to this Frankenstein case, right? But it's a valid order. I mean, that order that he attached to that Frankenstein case that he created is a valid order that is actually appealable, okay? So what I did was to let the period of appealability, I don't know if that's what it would be called, right? But I let the time that I had to appeal the dismissal expire. So the dismissal order is not even appealable, and not like there's not a single order in that case that is appealable at this point in time, because all of the the periods, the periods that in which I could have appealed, all the orders that happened in this case have already expired. So there is not one order that clerk on the Court of Appeals can take and fabricate another case. It just doesn't exist. The only appealable order in this docket is now the denial of this motion that I filed today when the judge denies it, right? Because I'm sure he's going to deny it. So that's going to be the only appealable order in the docket. So he doesn't even have ammunition to create a fake case, because there is no other order that could be appealed in the docket, you see? So that's why I let the time pass and did not appeal it. It was an intentional move. And also, I have to tell you, and the second reason was this, right? So because I know the dire situation in which they are in today, I knew that if I let the time pass and I drove towards the federal court at the last possible minute, they would do something to stop. Like I just knew, right? Based on my experience dealing with them, right? Yeah, so another gray sedan behind me, listen again, right? So it looks like the gray sedans, at this point it's been four gray sedans acting as level 2s when I'm talking about legal topics, right? Now, it could be that the color is tied to the topic, to which specific triangle. Maybe if I'm talking about technology, it would be a white car. I don't know, right? Could be that, or could be that the level is tied to the color. But definitely one of the two dimensions seems to be tied to the color. Gray. Anyhow, right. So I knew that if I attempted to drive towards the federal court at the last minute for filing the time when I could file an appeal, they would do something to stop me, to protect Elon Musk and Travis Kalanick, right? So this is what I did. Yes, that's why yesterday I drove towards the memorial area. Now, what I'm going to say, I cannot prove it, right? That it was intentional, but the timing was very. I'm building what they call a circumstantial case, right? I imagine if authorities investigate this, they could tell if this was designed or not. But this is what happened. At around 3 p.m., I start driving towards the federal court, like 2:45. I would have, if there was no incidents, I would have almost 2 hours to get to the federal court, and it's usually a 45 minutes drive. Okay. So I had plenty of time. But what happened is, as soon as I passed the Highway 6, there was a huge accident on the I-10 on that direction where I was traveling, and all the lanes became blocked. It was like if if I was really going to the federal court, I would have not gotten there by 5 p.m. They would have stopped me, right? I believe that this was by design because in their mind, I only had 2 more hours to file this appeal that could potentially create more trouble for them or even revive the case against Elon Musk and Travis Kalanick. And there is huge exposure behind that because Travis Kalanick was the CEO of Uber when the attacks started. And, Elon Musk, the Tesla, I'm driving a Tesla, like it's just a lot of liability. He became my boss at Twitter. I mean, not my direct boss, but like I met with him personally. He called me to a meeting to review my code personally. I'm talking about Elon Musk, the billionaire, right? He called me to go to San Francisco to meet with him in person. Imagine that, right? The level of liability that is there. Anyhow, so I knew they were going to try to stop me, right? And this happened on the I-10 at that exact time. Like the accident happened maybe 2 minutes before I was driving towards, on that point. Like 2 minutes, less, and I would have not hit the accident. That's what I'm trying to say. So I think this was designed yesterday, right? But I guess, authorities will have to check, right? Who were the people involved? Who was the police officer? Are they marked in the geo-index? Are their houses marked in the geo-index? Do their personal vehicles have the markers? There's tons of ways to tell, right? Oh, sorry. I think I made a mistake here. Okay. So it could be easy to tell. But that was the second reason, right? I wanted to create more, circumstantial evidence, I guess. I wanted to see if they would do something radical like this to stop from going to the Supreme Court. That's why I left at 3 p.m. I could have gone in the morning or, but they wouldn't have pulled it off because they would have thought, whatever we do, he will get there, right? Like unless we crash into his car, he will get there. But because it was 3 p.m., this created a window of opportunity for them to create an accident, something that would delay me and, could not be demonstrated that it was there, right? So that's what happened. And that's the accident yesterday on the I-10. Of course, my intention was never to go to the federal court yesterday. I was driving to the Wolf Industries or Enterprise, I think it's called. It's an important hub, and I got good data from the parking lot, and it's recorded and stored in the Google Cloud bucket that I have on Google Cloud. So that's that about yesterday. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention on this demo is a bit of it's a theory, right? Like I cannot prove that this is the case. It's a theory, but I have to tell you, it's based on software. Well, it's based on two things: on systems architecture, and it's also based on see, they have a great car behind me again. It's based on software and it's based on system architecture. It's kind of a radical shift in paradigm. I mean, it's a radical shift in paradigm in comparison to to things I've said recently in some of the demos, right? But it would not be a radical shift in paradigm in terms of software architecture or systems architecture, and it's supported by data. So let me tell you what I'm thinking. I'm just mentioning this in case, So, the escalation of all this campaign happened, as I mentioned before, when I mentioned to my former partner on March 27th, 2025, that I had discovered the existence, really, of Robert Mueller. I didn't know who he was. Like, I don't follow politics. I'm not, I didn't know the name. I understood who he was by looking at the debug output of my software that I was running on top of the geo-index that the Venezuelan intelligence gave me. And I understood that he was a neighbor that lived 300 feet away from my home, right? So when I say to my former partner that I'm going to report him to the IRS, she doesn't say anything, but the next day, within hours, the child was taken. Now, of course, this led me to, as a person, right, to think that he's important, and which he is important, right? Don't get me wrong, but this led me to think that he directly was, orchestrating the retaliation, right? Like to defend himself. And the same with the governor of Texas, right? In that comment that I made to her that day, I also mentioned Greg Abbott. And, I mentioned the same thing. And in fact, I reported him to the IRS. And that report is in the book, right? It's printed in the book. So, of course, the retaliation makes me think, well, this is Greg Abbott personally retaliating, right? Which, I mean, could be part of it. Don't get me wrong. But the thought is a bit of a shift from that mindset, okay? So let me tell you where this is a mini project, let's call it that way, that I started working on. Let me tell you where it started, okay? It started on the observation of this distributed system that this network has, of surveillance, right, and harassment. It's a distributed system powered by humans. Instead of, the nodes, instead of being servers, are humans. So the thought was, well, in any distributed system, like MapReduce or Moped or whatever, you have this hierarchical structure or design. And one of the principles, as I said in one of the previous demos, is that you should try to move all you can to the leaves, okay? And because it's cheaper, it scales better, the leaves would be these people following me on the ground, right? Like they have to do the majority of the work here on the ground instead of doing it at the headquarters, right? That's the way they solve this problem. And that's the way Google solves problems, right, as well, when it comes to software. So see, this is the same guy, VGV. See, VGV. So Victor, January Victor, 5374. So the same guy that was following me behind on the tollway, at the end he ended up being next to me here. You see, like that's the level 2. That guy is the level 2. So now that we know that he's the level 2, let's try to see if we can get his face. Right, that's the logical thing to do here. Of course, it's pitch black. Yeah, so it's a man maybe on his 50s. I couldn't make his ethnicity, to be honest with you, because the windows are too dark. Yeah, but that's definitely the level 2. So anyhow, I mean, the ethnicity, he could be Venezuelan or could be South Asian. But I could only see the color of his skin and general features, but I cannot really tell you. Anyhow, yes, so I was saying that, like in these distributed systems, right, you try to move things to the leaf. So they're doing this work on the leaves, right, like here on the ground. So thinking about that, right, about those distributed systems, if I'm trying to map people, right, because these systems that they have was architected by people like Elon Musk and Travis Kalanick, right? I mean, they are the designers, right, of the systems architecture of this, right, of this. I mean, the espionage and all that predates them, but like this modernization of the espionage was done by them, right? That's my working, theory, right? So anyhow, so knowing, like if you know who did the thing, you can foresee, design choices they would have made, right? So I think that so what I'm trying to do is to map, people and function in the reality of the physical world to what they would map to in a distributed system like Google Search, for example, right? So for example, I think in this model, right, of mapping that I'm working on mentally yesterday, I think Greg Abbott or Robert Mueller would be the equivalent to superroot, right? So they would be a high level of aggregation, really, right? And the output of what they do would result in things like policy or law changes, right? Or I don't know, things that are high level, really, right? But they would be like the equivalent to superroot, okay? Now, my thought was that, and here I'm going to talk about more technical details, right? But if if you're trying to map this system to Google, right? I mean, in Google, what I'm trying to say in Google, superroot is not a very sophisticated piece of software, and I mean no disrespect to the people working in superroot. I have high respect for them. Like I work with, I love those people from a technical point of view, and as people, like they're very nice people. I mean no disrespect when I say this, right? But really, if you look at the stack of Google, superroot is not really, it's not the most complex piece of software, right? It does very important things, and the way they do it is very sophisticated. But from a distributed systems point of view, is not where the depth of the work is being done, to put it in a way, right? And it is a single point of failure, you see. So if the superroot dies, Google search goes down completely. You could not do a search in Google in superroot. So it has to be very, very, very resilient, okay? And it has to be replaceable. The superroots have to come up very quickly. They cannot take 5 minutes to reboot. It adds all these constraints for making reliability possible for the entire stack, okay? Because precisely superroot is a single point of failure, okay? And when I start thinking of this, I think I said, Greg Abbott cannot possibly be the leader of this, right? I mean, he could be the leader from a political point of view. I don't know. Like as I said, I'm not a political. I don't follow politics. I don't know, Greg Abbott. What's his role in the party? I don't know that. I to be honest, I've never heard Greg Abbott speaking. To give you an idea, right? I don't know what his voice sounds like, so I don't know. But, if the designers of this system are Elon Musk and Travis Kalanick and those people and the PayPal mafia and, or the Communist Party of China, right? They wouldn't make Greg Abbott the leader in Texas for obvious reasons. Because if Greg Abbott, I don't know, God forbids, gets sick, right, and dies. I'm not wishing, and I want Greg Abbott to be very healthy and to live a very long life. Very long, right? But suppose that for a second, for the sake of the argument. If that happened, then it would send all this system into chaos, right? Like all this would collapse because one person died. The Communist Party of China will not allow that to be the case for obvious reasons. So they have to build resiliency into this system in the same way that Google built resiliency into Google search by not making superroot the most sophisticated piece of software where the heavy work is done. Because if that was the case, then the system could die if superroot dies, right? Superroot has to be simple to the point that it can come up in seconds, right? So that's the design philosophy. So when I thought of that, I understood, I think I understood, right? Well, I don't know what to tell you first, what I think or the metric I developed. So I developed a metric, right, to test this hypothesis. And the metric is, this is what I did. I looked at the vectors of attacks that they have applied towards me, which are money and family, right? So what they have been trying to do for the last, 5 years is to drive me into bankruptcy and, separate me from my son. Those are the two things, right? Or, my family in general. Like if you look at also my siblings and, we're all in different geographical places. And I think they did this on purpose, right? Like to split us up in a way to make us weak, right? As a family. But the important thing is that the two vectors of attack are family and money, okay? And who controls family and money? If you think about it, of a target. If you want to attack a target, who has control over the family and money of a target? Well, the judges. It's not Greg Abbott. Greg Abbott cannot possibly affect the money and family of anybody, right? He could affect policy. He could affect many things, but he cannot directly go to your house and take your child. He cannot get into your bank account and take your money. But a judge can do those things, right? What I'm trying to say is that if I was the Communist Party of China, I would put the power on the hands of the judges, not on the hands of Greg Abbott. So I think the leaders really are the judges. Not Greg Abbott is an instrument of the judges. Why? Because he has, by law, the power to designate more judges. So he can create new judges. So the setup is simple. The ones that really hold the power are the judges, right? They are the ones that are running this. And that's why it's so difficult to get these motions heard, right? Because they're a coalition of judges, right? They're acting as a unity of judges. And Greg Abbott is an instrument of them, because when they want to create a new judge, they just call Greg Abbott, right? And Greg Abbott creates a new court and creates a new judge. Like, he can create a new court and a new judge with a strike of a pen, right? So it's a way for the coalition of judges to perpetuate their circle, right? Their I don't want to call it a race, but like, they can perpetuate their own agenda by creating more like them, right? I mean, well, I don't know, right? If you look in nature, right, a group of beings that have the ability to reproduce are a species, right? I mean, in a way, they are a species, right? Because they are a group of individuals with a set of distinct characteristics, meaning they're judges, and they have the ability to produce more like themselves, right? So, I mean, you could make the argument that this is a species, right? This is a new species, the species of the judges, right? So, and the instrument they use to reproduce is not, they're not sexual interactions, is Greg Abbott. Greg Abbott is a method, really, of reproduction. When they want to create a new judge, they just call Greg Abbott, right? So that's why it's important to protect Greg Abbott, because it's the reproductive organ of this species, right? So when I saw that, what I did, when I saw that, it's a hypothesis, right? It's a theory. Like, I don't know if this is the case, right? Like, I thought it is. Ultimately, we'll investigate, I imagine, right? And say, yes, this is exactly what's happening, right? Or no, you're wrong, right? I don't know. But I think, so I created this metric, right? The metric is simple, right? Because I know the vectors of attacks, because I have experienced them for years. It's simple. I compute what is the discretionary power. I can measure this, right? What is the discretionary power of every single individual in the network for taking your child or your money? If you do this, you will see that Greg Abbott basically has no power. I mean, to take the money or the child, right, of anybody. So from the metrics point of view, Greg Abbott is really powerless, right? But, for example, Telfair has a lot of power. And you can aggregate that to who controls Telfair, so to the administrative judge. So, for example, what I'm trying to say, Judge Susan Brown is an individual in this society that is way more powerful than Greg Abbott himself. And if you want to know who is one of the most powerful individuals in this society, according to these metrics, it would be Chief Justice Terry Adams, because he decides on cases that are worth billions of dollars, like the Deep Ocean case, right? Like the drilling company that I talked about in one of the demos. And he, manages the appeals. He decides on the appeals of hundreds of children, right? That decide the fate of the parental rights of hundreds of parents and the ability to see their children. So one of the most powerful individuals in Texas by these two metrics is, in reality, Chief Justice Terry Adams. Which is surprising to see, because you would have never suspected that. Like, you would think Greg Abbott is more powerful. But if you look by this metric, Greg Abbott is not more powerful. It's powerless, basically. Greg Abbott is really an instrument of the judges, if you apply this mindset. But I don't know, that thought is chilling, right? When I had that thought of, well, this is really a species. I mean, but please don't take this the wrong way. Like, I know this could be misread, right? So I'm very careful when I say it. It's not a discrimination thing, or I'm not, it's not an inflammatory comment. But like, if you look purely at what defines a species, is really a set of characteristics that is unique to that group of beings and the ability to reproduce. I think that's it, right? What is the means of reproduction can change. There are species that don't have sex, or that they can change sex. Right? The individual could be a woman in his season and could be a male in the other. And there are other species that can reproduce without even sexual interaction, right? So, if you look at that criteria, these could be categorized as a new species. I mean, that's my philosophical contention, right, in this argument. That, they have a set of very distinct characteristics. Is that, they're judges, they have education in law, and they can take your money and your child. And they can reproduce by calling Greg Abbott. They can create new judges at will, right? So I mean, I would categorize it as a species, right? Now it would be this is a more philosophical conversation, but it would be interesting to go down in that taxonomy and try to understand what type of a species. I mean, what is the kingdom, right, that they would belong to? I don't know. It could be. I have to think more about this. I haven't thought about this enough, but I have to tell you, I developed these metrics, and according to these metrics, the king of the hill is really Chief Justice Adams, even above the justices on the Supreme Court, because the justices on the Supreme Court decide on more, high level abstraction, a higher level of legal abstraction issues, right? That do not directly touch on money or children. I mean, they cannot take your children, right? I mean, the Supreme Court justices, right? So in that sense, they have less power than Chief Justice Adams. And this observation is consistent with what I mentioned in that demo when I talked about Chris Branson, okay? Where you saw, I don't know if you remember the chart, where the first court of appeals was to the roof, right, in terms of scores on the cases. So, I think I'm into something deeply, deeply philosophical, but true here, okay? So with this, I'm going to close this demo, and I'll see you on the next one, okay? Bye.
Hi, good evening. Today is February 22nd, 2026, and my name is Rinaldo J. Aguiar Marcano, and I'm recording this from my home at the 2302 Britton Ridge Drive, Katy, Texas, 77494. So this would be the third segment of demo D112. And my goal with this one is to go a little bit deeper into some of the things that we talked about in the previous segments. Particularly some things related um, to those observations about what I would call a judiciary map reduce, right? Which is this distributed system of judges that they have to attack targets. Which I in the previous segment I made the philosophical argument that it could be categorized as a species, right? Really, as a living organism composed by different people, right? So I would like to talk a little bit more about that, and just a few other small legal topics. So to begin, I think a good place to begin would be to tell you a little bit more about those metrics that I described in the previous segment. So in the previous segment, I said something to the effects that I developed a couple of metrics, but I didn't really go into the details about how those metrics are computed. Like, like you may think that these are estimates, right? That these are guesses, but they're really not, right? Like they're really very deterministic metrics. So I want to give you more details on how I compute them. So to recap or to catch up on that part of the previous segment, what I did was to look at the vectors of attacks that they've been employing consistently against me for the last 5 years. Right when things started escalating, when Briscoe saw that I had developed key opinion leaders. Well, really, the Communist Party of China saw that I had developed key opinion leaders.com. So since that point forward, all they have been doing to do consistently is one of two things: attack me financially, meaning trying to drive me into bankruptcy, or attack me with my family, like harming people that I care about, right? Or separating me from them. So kind of a psychological attacks, right? Like, but using as a vector, your family, right? And this has been consistent over the last 5 years. They haven't done anything else, anything, let's say, new other than that, right? So this tells me that these two vectors of attack are the vectors of attack, right? That the Communist Party of China has used for decades to get to where they are, really, in terms of world domination and world control. So this led me to think, right? If you are the Communist Party of China and you want to create a society, a parallel society you obviously would have to put the power in the hands of, but you have to make the power distributed, right? For the reasons of resiliencies that I described before. If you concentrate the power in a single individual, if that person dies or revolts, the system goes into chaos. So what you have to do is to split the power into multiple individuals, right? So nobody individually holds too much power. This makes the system resilient. Um, and if there has to be a figuring of power, like a political leader or something like that, that position has to be set up in a way that it's easily replaceable, right? If the person dies or you decide to kill him, right, like what happened with Chavez, you can replace him very quickly with anybody, Maduro, right? Um, and it doesn't really affect the the continuance of the system, right? The system keeps running. And I compare this strategy or this design philosophy to superroot at Google. This is a bit technical, but I'm guessing that when these people learn about this information, everybody will know what superroot is. So I'm not going to go into much detail here about what it is. So like following this line of thinking, what I did was to develop metrics to measure this deterministically, right? I mean, thinking that if you were the Communist Party of China, you would naturally want to put the power in the hands of multiple individuals, and it would have to be individuals that have the capability of performing these attacks, obviously, right? Um, because it makes logistical sense, right? Like you wouldn't want to create a powerful individual that doesn't have these characteristics in this society that they're creating, right? So this led me to the creation of those metrics. But again, don't think that those metrics are guesses or are estimates or heuristics. Those metrics are deterministic. And I want to tell you a little bit more about how I compute them. So what I did was to gather or to use the code records that I already have, right? In those code records, like for example, orders, like, if you scrape, I'm talking more on technical details, right? As an engineer, as a software engineer, if you scrape or if you have a database, it doesn't matter how you get the records, right? But if you have a database of court records, like cases, like the dockets, the dockets and the orders that belong to each case that each judge has decided over the last year, suppose. In those orders, you will see things like, for example, when Judge Telfair entered that order, that, sorry, you will see things like when Judge Telfair entered that order in my case, for example, in my family case, right? He entered that order saying the void order that he entered when he had no jurisdiction, so it's invalid. But if you read the order, it has a dollar amount. It says you have to pay this much money on, whatever, right? Per month. You have, for some other people, it would say you have to give the house to the other party, right? The car, who's going to take this car and who's going to take that car, right? So you see, all these things have a monetary value that you can, it's a dollar figure that I can accumulate and sum up per judge, right? I can aggregate this number per judge. So what is the dollar amount that this judge costs to change hands per year? That is the metric, right? And you can see this depends on many things. It depends on, for example, where the judge is located. Because, for example, a hypothetical example, right? The judge in Manhattan, in New York City, would have a discretionary power over money much higher than Telfair. Why? Well, because people in that zip code, the average income, I think, is $1.5 million per year, right? But in Katy, it's $90,000 or $100,000, right? Per capita, or I don't know, $60,000. I don't know what it is, right? I can't recall. But you see, so depending on where the judge is, this number would change because the cases he will be exposed to, he or she, will have, in average, the distribution will be very different, right? In monetary value. So that's one metric. How many dollars per year this judge can cost to change hands? You can also aggregate this metric by the administrative judges. Well, in general, by who controls the judges, right? Because it depends on the setup and depends on the type of court. Like, for example, it could be the county judge In the case of Katie, it would be George. I think his name is KP George. Uh, it could be Judge Brown, who is the administrative judge of the 11th region. In the case of, I'm talking about the courts here locally, right? How they aggregate up the chain. In the case of a federal court, for example, you could think about SDTX, the Southern District of Texas, and you can aggregate that by who controls that court. I mean, who has supervisory power over that court, meaning the Fifth Court of Appeals, right? Who has supervisory power over that court and also courts in New Orleans and other parts of Texas. So you can aggregate, you can aggregate by judge, you can aggregate by court, you can aggregate by region. So you can do different levels of aggregation and compute this metric across different levels, right? So basically what you're computing is what is the power that every particular judge or even a court have in terms of, and this is not hypothetical, this is actual monetary value that this court has demonstrated to have. You can think about it this way, right? Like they already demonstrated to have this power because they have created these orders in the last year, right? On whatever period of time you are analyzing this, right? So that's one metric. The second metric is similar idea, but with number of children. So how many children Josh Telfair, for example, right, has ordered to change hands in this way that he did with me, meaning, cutting off the parental rights of one parent and giving the child to the other. Which, by the way, I want. This is something that I've learned during this process, and I've always been to say it, but I always forget to say it, but it's important, right? This thing that you're seeing of taking a child and giving it to another party could be a parent, but could be somebody else. This is not new. This is exactly what the Operation Condor did in the 70s. Exactly. Like when they had a target, and I read this in some history writings, when they had a target, what they would do, they would kidnap the child, sometimes legally, with courts, with judges and stuff, but sometimes illegally. Like sometimes they would just take the child and they would give it to an opposing party. So, for example, if it was a political opponent, a leftist political opponent, they would take the child and would give it to somebody powerful that wanted to have a child and couldn't, for example, from the right wing, right? So now your political opponent has your child, right? And that is a powerful weapon, right? I mean, in that situation, right? And this is exactly what they're doing, right? Like they're taking your child and then they're giving it to an adverse party that is adverse to even your ideals, right? So anyhow, the second metric is, but what I wanted to tell you there is that this is nothing new, right? Don't think that this has been going on for at least 50 something years, right? I mean, the thing with the children, right? But that's the other metric, right? So how many children every judge has demonstrated to have the power to change, to make the child, be under the care of somebody else. So if you aggregate by these two metrics, right? Children, number of children, and money per year, that is the metric that I use to compute. You can think of that of the firepower of every single judiciary actor in this network. That is effective because like they're using the judges as weapons. I'm talking about the Communist Party of China. So what is the firepower of each judge? That's basically what I'm computing, right? So that's that's what I did. So now let me show you. Let me share my screen with you to show you how this evolved, right, over the last few days. I mean, this project. So I'm sharing my screen with you. Okay. So until this point, I mean, last week until last week I have been working on this book, on the second volume of the January docket, which is basically a compilation of legal documents and complaints and supplement to the complaints that I filed with the DOJ, but specifically to my case. Like the first volume is more higher level, But the second volume is specifically about George Telfair, George Brown, David Perwin, all these actors locally that have been doing this to take my son. Um, so what happened was when I had this realization, right, about the judges really being the ones running this scheme. I mean, this network, right? This Rico enterprise, really. And I'm listening to the demo because I'm doing QA on the audio, and I'm at the same time looking at this visual that you have on the screen right now. I mean, the front cover of the book of the volume 2, where I have those judges and attorneys. There's some attorneys in there as well, but they are aligned in in a row, right? Two rows really. One row, the upper row is state actors, so those are state level judges, and the lower row are the two federal judges that until that point were involved, right? Directly involved in obstructing justice. So when I see this, what I thought was, I mean, this looked to me like nodes in a distributed system that had been laid flat. That's what it looks. I mean, with this renewed understanding of the situation that I have now, I look at this cover, and what I see is not really judges. They're nodes. I mean, to me, it's obvious, right? They're just nodes arranged in a flattened manner. So what I did was, well, if this is really a distributed computing system 3 that in which the node has been flattened, I could reconstruct the structure by using the metrics I just described, right? So all I have to do is compute the metrics for all these judges and and rank them, and that would basically give me the structure of the tree. Like I can deflatten the tree in a way. I'm talking about computer software, right? Software engineering. So this is exactly what I did, right? And with this, I created a new cover, right? Which is what I'm going to show you, which is this one, right? So this is, the typical triangle that people that working in distributed system would use to represent a hierarchical distributed system like the, Muppet or Google Search or Hadoop or MapReduce. But the nodes in here, the judges that were in the other cover, are now arranged by their score. And you can see what I was mentioning in the previous segment. You can see this visually. You can see that Judge Terry Adams, who is the Chief Justice of the first Court of Appeals in Texas, is the individual in this network with the most power if you rank them by this metric, by these two metrics, right? Because he decides on cases that are worth billions of dollars, like that Deep Ocean Drilling Company case that we saw in demo 97, 98, I can't recall. And he decides on the appeals on cases that touch on the parental rights of literally hundreds of parents per year. And don't take my word, like you take my word for it. Like, all you have to do is go to SCO TX, so like Supreme Court of Texas, right? Abbreviated, watch.org. And if you do this in your browser, it will take you to this dashboard that I built using the data in the Venezuela Intelligence Index. And this data is aggregated by case, by court, using the points in the geo index. Right? And I did this exercise in a demo live. Like this is recorded how I did this. And you can see this big bar is Chief Justice Adams. Like all the cases, I mean, the majority of the cases that he touches on, the parties and the attorneys, or at least one of the parties and the attorneys, are marked in the geo index that Diosdado Cabello gave me in 2024. And you can see the disproportion of this, and it's obvious that this is not random, right? Like he's obviously a weapon, right? And he's a powerful weapon in this system. And that gives him a lot of power. So this is why I dropped the conclusion that he is more powerful than Greg Abbott, right? And he is probably at the top of this hierarchy, right? So this is and all these are cases touching, minors, children, right? Like that they have taken away from one parent and things like that. And all these cases, in this case, ended up in the Supreme Court of Texas. Right? You can see that by the number, by the case numbers, right? I have only 40 years. I mean, after the 25. 25 is a year, and the other one is the case number. And my case number is, of course, in that list, right? So, so yes. So that's basically, what I did. But here I want to tell you, right? When you see this triangle in this new cover, so this would basically be the volume 3 of the book. So what I did, I took the second segment of this demo, so the 112.2, and I turned it into a book because it seems to me like it's a unifying theory of what is happening, right? Not to me, but like in general, how this situation evolved over the last 30 years. This this abomination, I would call it, right? Of this merge of technology, with all these distributed systems for espionage, uh, for attacking citizens using the judiciary systems of their own countries, powered by technology, right? How this has evolved over the last, I don't know, 30 years. Um, so I turned this into a book, right? It's a short book, and this is the cover. But I want to give you a disclaimer that when you see this, right, you see, for example, here, what I did is that I merged visually. For example, you can see that the judges on the state side, so the ones on the left, so those are Texas judges, right, from the state judiciary system, while the ones on the right, uh, meaning in this case, Justice Crane, Justice Hittner, and Judge Hanks, they are on the federal side, but I'm putting them all together in the same triangle. But I want to tell you that this is for illustrative purposes, right? Like, this is not in reality how it works. I think, and this is also what I'm telling you, is based on analysis of those metrics that I described. I think in reality, what they have is not one, but two of these triangles. They have one I'm talking about the network, right? So they have one societal system like this for state judges, and they have another societal system like this for federal judges. Okay. Um, but and here's something interesting happened, right? An interesting observation. What I did was that I started, working with this hypothesis of having two separate triangles, right? Because obviously it's two separate judiciary systems, right? So I started aggregating the metrics that I'm describing: number of children taken and amount of money that the judge cost to change hands, across these two different systems separately, right? To see how they compare. Um, and it seems to me like there is a serious anomaly in what I'm seeing in the data. Let me tell you what I'm saying. This is just, an observation, right? I don't know if this is the case, but somebody should probably, the DOJ or somebody should look into this, right? What I'm saying is that if you look at these two hypothetical triangles, right, and you aggregate these metrics across the entire triangle, in this case, at least in this set of cases that I'm looking at in Texas, the the state triangle, meaning the state actors, seem to have a disproportionate amount of firepower in terms of these two metrics that I'm describing, compared to the federal judges, which seems to me counterintuitive because, as I understand it, and maybe I'm wrong here, but as I understand it, first of all, the federal system seems to have a higher level of authority than the state court system. Like, in theory, if the state judiciary actors misbehave or do something illegal, you can go to federal court and they would correct it. They should, right? So, from what I understand, hierarchically, the federal courts have supervisory power over the state courts. And this has to do with the way this country, the United States, is set up, legally speaking, the legal framework, right? So that's one observation. And because of that, you would think that the cases that are heard on the federal side of things in Texas, for example, in the Southern District of Texas, would be higher level, higher impact cases. Like, you would see things where, more children are changing hands, or, more higher amounts of money. And the other anomaly that I see is that if you think about the statistical distribution of cases, right, that are here, because you could think, well, this is because of how the law works, right? The first observation is because the state courts are the ones that are charged with the task of dealing with family and money. So, of course, they're going to have the higher metrics in those areas that you're describing because of their charter, in a way, right? Could be. But the second anomaly cannot be explained by that. The second anomaly is, well, if you have a universe of cases in the state court system, all things considered, a certain percentage of them should spill towards the federal arena because things couldn't be resolved because the party wasn't happy, whatever, right? But a percentage of those cases should go to the federal arena, right? Organically. And if you look at those, the distribution of those cases in terms of number of children taken or amount of money taken should be comparable to the ones in the state courts because there are a subset of them. And this is not true in this case. The cases that you see in federal court, the distribution of the cases among themselves is very different than the distribution of the cases among themselves in the state court. So this is unexplainable how this has happened, right? And here I have a theory, and it's just a theory. I cannot prove this. I don't think I should try to prove it. Like this is something that needs to be investigated by a team of people that are specialized in this. But I think the reason is because this network is intentionally splitting the way they use these two triangles, these two societal systems for different purposes. So I think this is really a footprint of how the Communist Party of China is using these judges. I think that's the reason. So my theory is that the state courts are used as a weapon. For example, to take children, to drive people into bankruptcy, things like that. While the federal court system is used as a shield only, meaning only to obstruct justice, to make sure that these judges on the state side are never held accountable. See? So it's a separation of function, but this is created by the Communist Party of China and Diosdado Cabello, really. It's not an organic consequences of the cases themselves. And this is why, if you look at this, this is consistent with what I'm telling you, that if you look at this chart, at this triangle that I'm showing you on the screen right now, you see that by these two metrics that I'm describing, Judge Terry Adams is more powerful than Judge Crane, who is the Chief Justice of the federal court. And this is a tremendous anomaly. You would think that by these aggregated metrics, Justice Crane, who is the Chief Justice of the federal court in Houston, would be a more powerful judge than, Terry Adams. This is counterintuitive, right? But again, I think this is a consequence of the misuse, the intentional routing and assignment of cases and, attacks really from the people that are controlling the judiciary from the top, right? Like the Communist Party of China and Diosdado Cabello, to attack people using these courts as a weapon in one case in the state system and as a shield on the federal side of things, right? But and here this observation brings to my mind a thought, right? Like this seems to me like a dangerous situation because it seems like an inversion, like a perversion, really, of the organic or the natural hierarchy that should exist between these two systems. The way the United States legal system is set up is that the federal courts have supervisory power over the state courts, right? And this is necessary for the entire state to function. I don't know. It seems to me like, first of all, it seems to me like a dangerous situation that the federal system seems to be subjugated to the state system. Like this is really what it means, right? That the people calling the shots are these state judges and have more authority and power in practice than the federal judges, right? So that's one, and I'm saying this is dangerous because this is the kind of thing that could lead to a misunderstanding between people and could lead to a confrontation, right? This could end into a separatist movement, right? Something like that, a civil war. Like this is the kind of thing that in other countries have created civil wars. So it's a concerning thing, right? Seeing this and this, remember, this is derived from data. Like I'm not, these are not guesses or assumptions, right? Or ideas. Like these people here are organized, ranked by these metrics. So I don't know. It seems like a dangerous situation, right? and a perversion really of the of the systems that everybody had agreed to live under. But the other observation, the other thought is that it's interesting to see also how they did it, right? I mean, how the Party of China did this, right? In this case, in this area, right? Because you see, like it seems to me like the mechanism is that they figure out that they can't, subvert the order in all the country, right? So what they did, because they have these hubs, is that by using bribes and crypto payments and things like that, they managed to invert the order and make the judiciary judges outrank in a way the federal judges, but in this area only, right? And this is by a combination of the federal judges subjugating themselves to the state actors, and you can see this in the cases, right, that I've been working on in my own cases, right? If I go to when I went and filed a federal lawsuit for violation of civil rights against all these state judges and enter evidence in the docket, what did Judge Hittner do? Right? Instead of opening an investigation or referring this to the FBI, he struck the complaint out of the record, right? To protect the state actors, right? So he is there surrendering his power as a federal judge to these people, right? That's what he did. He basically, I don't know how to say this, but it feels like he abdicated as a judge, right? He he surrendered, right, to them when he did that. And this is how the Communist Party of China inverts the natural order in the judiciary, right? And once they create this perversion, democracy decays. Because what it really means is that there is no federal oversight over even the politicians in Texas. I mean, if you try to sue the governor of Texas, and I'm not guessing here, I'm trying to sue the governor of Texas, you can't, because the federal judges, you will have to sue him, in federal court. The federal judges will strike the complaint out of the record, right? So they are unsuable. You cannot sue Greg Abbott in Texas. I mean, even in the federal system, you have to sue him in Washington, right? In another state, maybe, right? But in Texas, in the federal court system, you cannot possibly sue Greg Abbott, right? And this is what makes democracy decay, because it creates impunity, and with that leads to corruption. Um, so the mechanism, understanding that is important, right? Because that's what people, I think, right, people that are tasked with fixing this problem need to watch for, right? This dangerous inversion of responsibility. Uh, and all the things that are implied in that. But what I wanted to tell you is that in this cover of this book, when you see this triangle, this is just for illustrative purposes, in the sense that I've merged the two triangles into one. But in reality, there's two triangles, right? There's one for state courts and there's one for federal courts. Both are compromised in the same way. It's the same mechanism. Both are using the intelligence apparatus of, Robert Mueller / Gustavo Cabello. Both are using, um, both have the reproductive organ. It's a different reproductive organ, but both systems have their own reproductive organ set up in exactly the same way. In the case of the state judiciary, the reproductive organ is Greg Abbott, because he can name new judges. In the case of the federal courts, the reproductive organ is something else, because that person can also name new judges, right? But it's the same setup. It's exactly the same setup. It's replicated, right? It's only that they're isolated. But they have two distinct functions. The state function, the state apparatus, is used to attack people like me, right? Like people that are speaking up against the network, or that are problematic, or that don't allow their technology to be stolen by the Communist Party of China. They get attacked, right, with the state courts. And if they go complain to the federal system, then the federal triangle that the Communist Party of China set up in the same hub will protect the others, right? That's the way it works. But now, speaking of these triangles, I want to tell you a small, short story about something I worked on at Google when I was an engineer there. This was maybe 2016, I would say, or 17. It was a project called Artemis that I created, and I'm not going to go too much into the details because I don't want to get this technical session, like in an engineering session per se. But the problem I was trying to solve when I had that idea is that in all distributed systems, even like the one I'm describing here, you have a problem of retrieval that it's inherent. Uh, it's inherent to the distributed nature of the system, and it's impossible to fix for statistical reasons. I'm not gonna like, go deep into that, but believe me for a second that that's the case. There is a flaw in all the distributed systems in the planet that it's unfixable. Right? Imagine that for a second. So, and Google had this problem, right? Especially with Google search. So I had an idea on how to fix it. The way I fixed it is by creating this project called Artemis. And Artemis, I gave it that name because Artemis, and it's the same name I gave to the non-governmental effort that I'm pushing forward. Artemis, according to Greek mythology, was a goddess that was the protector of the weak and the children. Right? And in these distributed systems, like the ones I'm describing, this retrieval problem is caused specifically on results or items that are not very prominent. They could fall through the cracks in a way. So the way I fixed the problem was by having the root, in this case, imagine the node at the top. Imagine, Chief Justice Terry Adams, right? He's the root. He would be the root in this distributed system. The way I fixed that problem at Google in 2016 was by having the root of the Google search talk directly to the leaves, to some of the leaves in some of the cases, not for every query. You cannot do this for every query because it wouldn't scale. But you could do this for 1% of the queries, right? And 1% of the queries at Google is a lot of queries, right? So I mean, this was a huge infrastructure project that I worked on, and it worked. It worked beautifully, right? And I pulled this off by communicating between the root and the leaves directly for some of the queries. Telling you this short story because when I see this distributed system that they have, and especially in the cases I'm working on, the legal cases, I can see the same pattern. You can see that in this line between Chief Justice Terry Adams and William Cal Adams here at the bottom, who is the attorney that owns the law firm that kidnapped my child, in combination with the judges. But like the law firm that did this and created the fraudulent documents to deceive the court where Chief Justice Adams is the Chief Justice. That man is William Cal Adams. And note that the two of them have the name Adams. That's because they're family. But you see, this is nothing else. I mean, this is the top of having the guy at the top and the guy at the bottom being family is not coincidental. It's the same software design system that I used at Google in 2016. It's a way of making the root be able to talk to the leaf. I believe the problem the Communist Party of China solved with this design in this case is that this allows these two people, because they're family, to have a barbecue together on a Sunday, right? And talk about the case. And this wouldn't create suspicion. Like, if the FBI is looking, well, these are just two people that are family and are having time together, right? It doesn't look like an improper ex parte communication, or that they're plotting together to kidnap the child, right? It gives plausible deniability to their communications. Um, but philosophically, I mean, from a software engineering point of view, this is nothing more than the root talking directly to the leaf, right? And I don't know, when I saw that, it was interesting to me. And I'm not saying it only because it's interesting, but because I imagine this is standardized. I imagine they have this set up everywhere, right? So if I was authorities, the DOJ, I would look for judges that, according to these two metrics, fall at the top of the pyramid in a hub, and they have a brother or a sister or a cousin or a mother or somebody that is an attorney, right? And is working on family cases. I mean, this has to be standardized. So that's why I'm mentioning. Okay, the next topic I have is information I received from the informant recently. I can't recall exactly what day was that, but he warned me, right, of the following. In these demos that because, there's been a lot of issues with the clerk. It's clear that the clerks are a weapon, right? At this point, every single clerk in every single of these courts has done something to obstruct justice, right? To different degrees of severity, but all of them have done something. So the informant told me, listen, yes, the clerks are in it, but these strategies, some of the strategies that they're deploying are really designed by the chief justices or whoever controls the judge, right? In some cases, the judge will be controlled by somebody else who is not the chief justice. Like in some court systems, there is not a chief justice, right? There is something else, an administrative judge or a county judge. There could be something else, but whoever controls the judge is really who is designing the strategy. So he told me these are like small pots, right? It's like the team lead, the one that is designing this, right? The clerk is used because the clerk has the password to the system and has the administrative access to create documents and delete documents, right? But really what they're doing is impersonating the clerk in a way, right? To use that figure as a shield, to not have to say, yes, I know about the conspiracy, and not only that, I'm part of the conspiracy, right? So they use the clerk's access to, obstruct justice, to protect themselves, but it's really the judges, right? So this is what the informant told me. And again, this is an informant that works for the Venezuelan army intelligence, right? According to him. But yeah, that's the information I got, right? And speaking of clerks, now I'm going to tell you something else. Let me show you this, right? So if we go to the Fort Bend County systems and we look for the family cases, and we look for that case where Judge Telfair has been, doing this for almost a year at this point. He entered more orders. This is incredible. Today, Sunday, right? Wow. Well, so this is what happened, right? You see index 176 here, right? In 176, this was done by Beverly McGrew Walker. This is what they did. When I filed the application with the Supreme Court of the United States, I served her, right? Because she's a party that is naming the complaint in the federal cases. So when I serve her, she gets a copy of the complaint, and in the cover page, it says Supreme Court of the United States, and the defendants are the federal judges. So what she did was that she took the complaint that I'm serving her basically as a defendant, and she filed it into the 387 court, basically making it look like I'm filing into the court. That's what she did. The idea of doing this is to find me in contempt, because remember, this case is under a temporary, an automatic stay until the Supreme Court rules on the motion to recuse. So this court has no jurisdiction to sign anything. But still, she took that document and filed it as if I had filed it. The idea with doing this is so that the judge can argue that I am myself violating the automatic stay. And then he can move forward and keep going with the case and keep harassing me, right? Because he cannot, because the case is stayed. So, but of course, this is fraud, because I never filed that document with this court. I sent this document to her as a personal service, right? And this document doesn't say anywhere in the cover 387th, or it doesn't have the name of the other party. It doesn't have, my former partner doesn't even appear in that document. So how she made the connection to then file it into this docket, that's something that really is beyond me, right? Like, I don't understand how she did that. But that's what they did, right? And the idea is to create a pretext for the judge to do this, to say, oh no, the case can continue because you filed something, right? I did it. Like, so this is a fabrication from the clerk. And you see what they did, right? So today, being Sunday, they filed this, right? So apparently the court signed, and look, if you click at the application, I mean, if you look at this supposed application, right, that she filed as if I was applying for something, you can see that you cannot see the application, right? So she marked it as private, precisely to make sure that nobody can download it and nobody can see what they're doing. And let's see what the orders say. Let's see if the orders are downloadable, right? Oh no, there are no orders, right? So it's a docket entry. So the judge had a hearing today, right? But what are the orders, right? Okay. So this is the motion for enforcement of temporary orders and motion for additional temporary orders. So this is what he signed, right? You see, you cannot download it. So, it's basically a situation in which nobody knows what he signs, really. I wasn't served with this, uh, you know, I mean, with the order, right? Uh, they didn't serve me with the order. He signed it on a Sunday. The court is on an automatic state, waiting for the answer to the third motion to recuse that should be decided on by the Supreme Court of Texas. This case is also in the Supreme Court of the United States, and he is notified because I also serve him, right? So I mean, it's a combination of judicial abuses that it's just mind-boggling, right? So let's see what happens. But yeah, so that's what Beverly McGrew Walker did. Uh, she basically fraudulently created a filing that I did not create. And if you think about it, it's the same TTP, the same technique and tactic that the clerk of the Fifth Court of Appeals on the Fifth Circuit did, right? He created that Frankenstein case that I did not create, right? To ignore my appeal of the document 61 on the case 04890 in front of Judge Hitler, right? So I appealed order 61, and what he did, he created a different appeal for a different order that wasn't what I was appealing. And he attached the wrong document. Like, it's the same thing, right? Creating something, filing something that is not what I filed. In this case, I didn't file anything, and she went ahead and filed it. The reason why they did this today is because today I filed a notice with this court, and I sent it to all of them saying, listen, I did not file index 176. This was the clerk doing this intentionally to find me in contempt to put me in prison, right? Violating the mandatory stay. I did not file this, right? And I haven't violated. But so because I did that, he came and signed this docket entry today being Sunday, because when the clerk office opens tomorrow, she would be forced to file my notice, right? So he has to justify that he didn't know, right? That it wasn't me. Basically, that's the idea, right? Things to create deniability, right? In their mind, they're going to be able to explain this. But speaking of this, I also want to tell you something about the clerk of the fifth of the appellate court of the Fifth Circuit, and that is that I was running the pipeline the other day, and the sequence is described elsewhere, right? Where I describe, I think it was 111 in the demo 111. I described the sequence, right? The rope that I appealed, the order 61, the motion to vacate that I filed in Judge Hitner's court, and the clerk of the Fifth Court of Appeal created an appeal, a fake appeal. Like, he created a fake case, and he backdated it to the day before. I made to create deniability, right? To say that this wasn't intentional. But then he ignored completely my appeal. I'm appealing document 61. He did not create that case, right? He created something else that he wanted to create. But anyhow, the finding, and this is just an idea. I'm not a prosecutor. I don't know if this is right or not, but it's just an idea I want to offer to authorities, right? If they investigate this and they decide to prosecute them, maybe, right? It could be a tool. So the observation is the following: the legal vaccine pipeline infers that when the clerk of the Fifth Court of Appeals of the Court of Appeals of the Fifth Circuit did this, he in the same motion, he also committed wire fraud, which is a federal crime. So interstate wire fraud. Why? Well, because I went in person to the federal court here in Houston, Texas, and I paid with debit, basically cash, to the clerk. $605 for my appeal for the document 61. And she gave me a receipt that says that I paid that money and that appeal was for the document 61. But then that information got transmitted via interstate wires using the electronic court systems of the court. And this clerk in Louisiana, which is a different state, received that information. And he made the intentional choice of creating a fake case and did not create the case that I paid for. So in effect, he defrauded me of those $605 using interstate wires because it's the electronic court system of its own court. So although the amount of money is small, it's $605, doesn't matter, right? It's still wire fraud. And that's important because it's a federal crime and the penalties are high. So that's what I wanted to mention. And the last thing I wanted to mention on this segment is that yes, the books, right? So the book level 2, volume 2, I already sent it to about half of the Judiciary Committee of Congress, and they already received it. Just mentioning that as a data point because I know that all these judiciary actors are really the ones that are running the show, right? So I mean, the Judiciary Committee of Congress, I'm guessing, right, would be charged with at least opening an investigation when they receive this information. So I wanted to mention that I already started that like a month ago. They already received the book, probably about a month ago. And in terms of, because it's a big committee, I think I have covered almost half of the committee on both sides of the aisle, right? So I wanted to mention that. So with that, I'm gonna close demo 112 part 3, and I'll see you on the next one.